The Great Emptiness. Why Italy's ancient villages are dying and what it means for civilization. Picture this. You're driving through the sun-drenched hills of southern Italy, expecting to find bustling medieval towns filled with the descendants of Caesar's legions. Instead, you discover something haunting. Entire villages with shuttered windows, crumbling stone houses, and streets where only the wind walks. This isn't post-apocalyptic fiction. This is modern Italy, where nearly 80% of the peninsula sits largely uninhabited, its ancient settlements slowly returning to dust. How did the birthplace of the Roman Empire, the Renaissance, and Western civilization become a land of ghost towns? The answer lies buried in centuries of demographic upheaval, economic transformation, and a migration pattern that would make even the barbarian invasions seem tame. The Roman foundation, when Italy was the world's heartland. To understand Italy's emptiness, we must first grasp its former fullness. During the height of the Roman Empire, Italy was the beating heart of the known world. Rome alone housed over 1 million inhabitants, a population density that wouldn't be matched again until the Industrial Revolution. The peninsula buzzed with activity. Roman roads connected thriving settlements, aqueducts brought water to mountainous communities, and every hilltop seemed crowned with a fortified town. The Romans had mastered the art of urban planning in challenging terrain. They built cities on mountaintops for defense, in valleys for agriculture, and along coasts for trade. The Italian landscape was a carefully orchestrated symphony of human habitation, with each settlement playing its part in the grand imperial design. But empires, like mountains, erode. The medieval multiplication, Italy's population explosion. The collapse of Rome didn't immediately empty Italy. In fact, the opposite occurred. During the medieval period, Italy experienced what historians call incastellamento, a proliferation of fortified hill towns. As central authority crumbled, local strongmen built castles on every defensible peak, and communities huddled beneath their walls. By the 13th century, Italy was arguably the most densely populated region in Europe. The countryside was dotted with thousands of small settlements, each typically housing 200 to 500 souls. These weren't cities as we know them, but rather fortified villages where farmers, artisans, and merchants created self-sufficient microeconomies. The Italian peninsula became a patchwork of city-states, each controlling its surrounding contado, countryside. Florence governed 150 surrounding settlements. Venice controlled hundreds of small towns across the Veneto. Even tiny San Gimignano, famous for its towers, ruled over dozens of satellite communities. This was Italy at its most populated, most vital, most intensely human. How? The Great Unraveling. Why the Exodus began. Here's where the story takes a dramatic turn. The very factors that made medieval Italy so densely populated began working against it. The first blow came from an unexpected source: the Black Death of 1347-1351, which killed 1/3 of Italy's population. But populations recover from plagues. What happened next was more insidious and permanent. The discovery of the Americas in 1492 shifted global trade routes away from the Mediterranean. Italian merchants, who had grown wealthy controlling east-west trade, suddenly found themselves bypassed. The economic lifeblood of thousands of small towns, trade and manufacturing, began to dry up. Simultaneously, agricultural changes made small hilltop settlements economically unviable. The introduction of new crops from the Americas required different farming techniques and larger plots. The terraced hillsides and small fields around medieval towns became obsolete. Farmers began abandoning the heights for the valleys. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected quarter: Italian unification in 1861. The unification paradox. How unity emptied Italy. You might expect that unifying Italy would strengthen its towns and cities. Instead, it triggered the greatest internal migration in European history. When the Kingdom of Italy was proclaimed, it connected the industrial north with the agricultural south through railways and roads. Suddenly, a peasant in Calabria could reach the factories of Milan. The newly unified state also imposed standardized taxation, military conscription, and legal systems. Many remote communities, which had governed themselves for centuries, found they couldn't adapt to modern bureaucracy. Young men fled to avoid military service. Families left to escape crushing new taxes. The statistics are staggering. Between 1861 and 1914, over 14 million Italians migrated, some to Italian cities, others to the Americas. Entire villages in the South lost 80% of their population within a generation. The earthquake of 1908, which destroyed Messina and Reggio Calabria, seemed almost symbolic of Italy's fragmenting social fabric. The demographic death spiral. Why recovery never came after World War II, Italy experienced its economic miracle, but this only accelerated rural abandonment. The country's industrial boom was concentrated in the Golden Triangle of Milan, Turin, and Genoa. Southern Italians poured north, leaving behind thousands of increasingly empty villages. Modern Italy faces a demographic crisis that makes its historical emptiness seem almost inevitable. The country has one of the world's lowest birth rates, 1.3 children per woman, and one of the oldest populations. Rural areas are hit hardest. Many southern villages have median ages exceeding 60. The young flee to cities or abroad. The old remain, tending empty houses and abandoned churches. When they die, their villages die with them. Pantab. The ghosts of Italy. What the emptiness reveals. Today, Italy's empty spaces tell a story that extends far beyond its borders. The abandoned villages, known as Borghi Fantasma, ghost towns, represent a global phenomenon. From rural Japan to the American Midwest, modernization creates winners and losers, concentrating populations in urban centers while leaving vast territories nearly uninhabited. Italy's 80% emptiness isn't just about Italy. It's about the price of progress, the cost of economic efficiency, and the human tendency to cluster in ever larger communities. The hilltop towns that once housed thousands now struggle to maintain dozens of residents. Ancient churches hold services for congregations of 5. Medieval palaces crumble because no one can afford to maintain them. Yet in this emptiness lies opportunity. The Italian government now sells abandoned houses for €1, trying to breathe life back into dead communities. Digital nomads and remote workers are beginning to repopulate some villages. Perhaps Italy's emptiness isn't permanent. Perhaps it's just waiting for the next chapter in its long, complex story. The empty 80% of Italy stands as a monument to the impermanence of human settlement, a reminder that even the most densely populated places can become wilderness again. In its silence, we hear the echo of empires rising and falling, of communities blooming and withering, of the eternal dance between civilization and nature. Italy's emptiness is humanity's story written in stone and silence.